For 40 years, there was a rule in the global fighter market. It was never written down, never formalized in any treaty or trade agreement. But every defense minister, every Air Force chief, every aerospace executive knew it. If it flies and fights, it has American parts. Not always the airframe, not always the radar, but somewhere the engine, the avionics, the weapons interface, the encryption, there was a component that required U.S. State Department approval to export, to upgrade, to sustain. That component was a leash. It meant that no matter how independent a nation's foreign policy, no matter how sovereign its defense posture, the ability to generate combat air power ultimately ran through Washington. Sweden learned this lesson for decades. The Gripen C and D flew on the Volvo ARM-12, a licensed version of General Electric's F404. The Gripen E upgraded to the GE F414. Better thrust, better reliability, same leash. Every export sale passed through American review. Every major systems upgrade required American approval. When U.S. political priorities conflicted with Swedish or customer interests, deals slowed, sometimes stopped. This was not hostility, it was structure. The American defense industrial base was not just a supplier, it was a governance system. It aligned Allied capabilities with American strategic objectives, not through coercion, but through integration so deep, so seamless, that disentanglement seemed impossible. Then Rolls-Royce did something that sounded technical but landed like an artillery shell. The EJ-230 engine, a derivative of the Eurofighter Typhoon's EJ-200, has been successfully adapted for the Gripen E. No GE components, no American core technology, no ITR restrictions. The leash is gone. And today we're not talking about kill ratios or stealth coatings. We're talking about the single most significant shift in the global fighter market since the F-16 entered service in 1978. This is the story of how a British engine, a Swedish airframe, and a Canadian Prime Minister's skepticism just broke 40 years of American aerospace dominance, and why the F-35, for all its extraordinary capability, just lost something it can never get back: its monopoly on the Western fighter market. Let's be clear about something. The Gripen has always been underestimated. We documented this in previous videos. Red flag, 2006, the 10-0 kill ratio against F-16s and Typhoons, the NATO accession and immediate combat missions. But underestimation was never the aircraft's real problem. Its real problem was provenance. Sweden is not a great power. It has no empire, no global basing network, no ability to project force thousands of miles from its shores. Its defense industry, while extraordinarily sophisticated, operates outside the dominant American and European supply chains. For decades, this meant compromise. The Gripen could be efficient, it could be reliable, it could be cleverly designed for austere operations and rapid turnaround, but it could not be independent. Every Gripen ever sold to South Africa, Thailand, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Brazil, carried American engine technology. That meant every operator, regardless of their strategic alignment with Washington, was subject to U.S. export controls. This was not a secret. It was simply the cost of doing business in a market where American components are ubiquitous and alternatives are scarce. Brazil, which builds Gripens domestically under a comprehensive technology transfer agreement, still requires U.S. approval for engine-related exports or modifications. Thailand, which has operated Gripens since 2011, has experienced delays and complications tied to American approval processes. Ukraine, which has signed a letter of intent for 100 to 150 Gripens, would have faced the same constraint. The F414 is an excellent engine, reliable, powerful, well supported globally, but it is also a point of leverage, and leverage once established tends to be used. Rolls-Royce's confirmation of the EJ230 adaptation does not sound dramatic if you don't understand the context. It's just an engine swap. It happens all the time in aerospace, right? Wrong. The EJ200, the engine's base design, was developed by Rolls-Royce, MTU Aero Engines, Avio Aero, and ITP Aero, a European consortium, zero American core technology, zero ITAR restrictions, zero State Department oversight. Adapting it to the Gripen required significant engineering work, air intakes redesigned, rear fuselage reshaped, new control systems integrated, thousands of hours of testing and certification. For years, the math didn't work. The development cost was too high without guaranteed production volumes. Then three things happened. First, Ukraine's requirement for 150 fighters moved from symbolic to serious. A post-war Ukrainian Air Force cannot depend on Russian-supplied systems. It cannot depend on American-controlled supply chains vulnerable to political volatility. It needs a sovereign, sustainable combat air capability. Second, Canada's fighter competition created a potential anchor order for a non-American configuration. 72 aircraft, domestic production, full technology transfer, volume sufficient to amortize non-recurring engineering costs. Third, the political environment shifted. Donald Trump's return, the tariff threats, the 51st state war rhetoric, the ambassador declaring we don't need Canada, all of it reinforced the same message. American-controlled supply chains are not neutral infrastructure. They are tools of statecraft. Swedish industry had been studying engine alternatives since 2020. GKN Aerospace Sweden, the successor to Volvo Aero, had explored upgrading the RM12As, remaining with the F414, or pursuing a clean break. The EJ230 was always the preferred option, technically superior, politically independent. It just needed the right moment. That moment is now. Let's be precise about what the EJ230 actually does. Performance first. The EJ230 produces approximately 26,000 pounds of thrust in its upgraded configuration, significantly more than the F414's 22,000. This translates directly into better acceleration, stronger climb performance, higher sustained speeds, improved payload flexibility, extended combat radius, enhanced supercruise capability under heavy loads. The Gripen E already demonstrates supercruise, sustained supersonic flight without afterburners, with the F414. With the EJ230, that capability expands meaningfully. These are not marginal gains. They reshape how the aircraft performs in the very mission sets Canada prioritizes: Arctic patrol, long-range interdiction, rapid response from austere strips. Now the strategic dimension. This is where the announcement becomes an earthquake. Without American components, there is no legal authority for Washington to block export sales, delay or deny upgrade approvals, restrict spare parts shipments, impose end-use monitoring conditions, leverage sustainment access for political objectives. Diplomatic pressure remains possible, but its effectiveness collapses when it reinforces the very argument it seeks to counter. Every tariff threat, every dismissive comment, every assertion of American dominance, each one validates the case for autonomy. Sweden can deliver, Britain can support, Canada could eventually manufacture. Supply flows remain insulated from third-party bargaining. This is not theoretical, it is structural. Now we arrive at the heart of the matter. Canada was always the key. Not because Canada is the largest potential Gripen customer, though 72 aircraft is a substantial order. not because Canadian aerospace is uniquely positioned, though Bombardier's partnership with Saab is genuine and significant. Canada is the key because Canada is the proof of concept. If a G7 nation, a NATO member, a NORAD partner with 75 years of integrated defense cooperation with the United States, if Canada can transition to a non-American fighter platform while maintaining full alliance interoperability, every other nation can ask the same question. Why can't we? This is what Washington truly fears. Not the loss of a single sale, the precedent. Saab's proposal to Canada already included full production line in Canada, 12,600 aerospace jobs, complete technology transfer, including source code access, domestic control over upgrades and modifications, export potential for Canadian-built components. That proposal was compelling before the EJ230. Now add Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce already operates significant aerospace facilities in Montreal, Quebec. Commercial aviation engines, established supply chains, skilled labor force. Bombardier anchors the region with deep experience in aircraft manufacturing. Engine production in Canada adds 3,000 to 5,000 additional high-skilled jobs. Engineers, machinists, inspectors, systems specialists, supply chain managers. These are not temporary contract positions. These are long-term, generational roles that anchor communities and generate sustained tax revenue. Once embedded, they are politically difficult to dismantle because doing so would hollow out an entire regional economy. Canada's fighter decision is no longer a choice between two jets. It is a choice between two economic futures. Ukraine's interest in the Gripen has been public for months. 100 to 150 aircraft. A complete rebuild of the Ukrainian Air Force around a Western platform. The largest fighter procurement in Europe since the Cold War. But Ukraine's planners understand something that Western defense analysts sometimes miss. Supply chain security is existential. A fighter fleet dependent on American approval for spares, upgrades, and sustainment carries political risk unrelated to battlefield requirements. That risk is manageable during peacetime. It becomes intolerable during active conflict when supply continuity is a matter of national survival. The EJ230-powered Gripen removes this uncertainty. Sweden can deliver. Britain can support. Production could eventually be established in Ukraine. The supply chain remains insulated from third-party leverage. This is not hypothetical. Ukraine has experienced exactly this dynamic with other Western weapon systems, delays, restrictions, conditions tied to political considerations far removed from the battlefield. The EJ230 is not just a better engine, it is a sovereignty guarantee. The EJ230 announcement was not aimed solely at Canada and Ukraine. It was aimed at every nation currently evaluating fighter procurement. Colombia signed for 17 Gripen EFs. Their initial aircraft will use F414 engines, but the long-term picture is not fixed. Future upgrades, sustainment pathways, and additional orders could shift to the EJ230 configuration. Regional neighbors are watching. Peru continues evaluations. Argentina's long-standing issues with British export restrictions complicate its options, yet alternative engine configurations weaken those constraints. Chile considers diversification beyond F-16 dependence. Latin America has become fertile ground for arguments centered on autonomy rather than allegiance. Thailand offers a practical example. Operating Gripens since 2011, Thai planners appreciate the platform's performance while remaining frustrated by limitations tied to American approvals. An EJ230-powered fleet enables domestic upgrades, local system integration, and operational tailoring without external permission. For a country that has long balanced relationships among major powers, that capability carries real value. The Philippines presents a different calculus. As a treaty ally hosting U.S. forces, alignment remains strong. Yet political volatility has repeatedly strained that relationship. Defense planners know reliance limits options. American fighters embed permanent dependence on goodwill. Gripens powered by European engines offer capability without exposure to shifting diplomatic winds. Portugal adds another dimension. As a NATO member with tight budgets, cost matters as much as performance. Lower acquisition and operating expenses, free resources for training, munitions, and readiness. Political leverage matters too. When procurement discussions involve pressure rather than persuasion, having an option immune to external veto changes the conversation. Across every region, the same calculation recurs. Sovereignty carries measurable value. Every government watching trade threats, political coercion, and alliance volatility is reassessing defense dependencies built during a different era. The EJ-230 powered Gripen provides a path away from those dependencies while maintaining interoperability and credible combat capability. This is not symbolism, it is strategy. None of this diminishes the F-35. It remains the most advanced fighter ever mass-produced. Its stealth sensor fusion and networked warfare capabilities are unmatched. For missions requiring penetration of integrated air defense systems, there is no alternative. But the F-35 was never just an aircraft. It was a system of control. Every operator except Israel is dependent on American-supplied mission data files, software updates, cryptographic keys, and sustainment access. This dependency was not an accident, it was architecture. The F-35 program was designed to lock allies into permanent, irreversible integration with the U.S. defense industrial base. Once you buy in, you cannot leave. The cost of exit, technically, operationally, financially, is prohibitive. This model worked for 20 years because the United States was perceived as a reliable partner. That perception is now contested. Not destroyed, not reversed, contested. And contestation is all that's required to create space for alternatives. The EJ-230 powered Gripen is not an F-35 killer. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to be credible enough, sovereign enough, and available enough that nations have a genuine choice. Because once a genuine choice exists, the terms of the relationship change. Washington can no longer say, "This is the only option." It must say, "This is the best option, and here's why you should choose us anyway." That is a fundamentally different conversation. Canada's Defense Minister, Bill Blair, has used a phrase that does not appear in any official policy document. Post-dependence. Not anti-American, not isolationist, not withdrawal from alliances. Post-dependence. The recognition that cooperation does not require subordination, that integration should not mean loss of control, that alliances in the 21st century must be negotiated relationships between sovereign equals, not hierarchical structures with a single power center. The EJ-230 powered Gripen is the first major weapons system designed for this era. It is not optimized for American power projection. It is optimized for national sovereignty, the ability of smaller nations to generate, sustain, and control combat air power independently, while still integrating effectively with allies. Sweden built this capability because it never fully trusted the guarantees of great powers. Now it is offering that same capability, that same skepticism, that same sovereignty to Canada, to Ukraine, to every nation reassessing its dependencies. And for the first time in 40 years, there is no American component that Washington can leverage to say no. For 40 years, the global fighter market operated on a simple premise: American technology, American supply chains, American approvals, allies integrated, dependencies deepened, alternatives remained permanently just out of reach. That era is ending, not because the F 35 failed, not because the Gripen suddenly became superior, not because of any single announcement or procurement decision, because the trust that sustained the system has eroded past the point of recovery. Every tariff threat, every dismissive comment, every assertion of American dominance from officials who don't understand how leverage actually works, each one has accelerated the search for alternatives. The EJ230 is the answer to that search. A European engine, a Swedish airframe, Canadian production potential, British sustainment support, Ukrainian commitment, no American veto, no State Department approval, no ITAR restrictions. The leash is gone. Canada still faces a difficult decision. The F-35 offers unmatched capability. The Gripen offers genuine sovereignty. The hybrid model, 16 F-35s, 72 Gripens, offers compromise but carries its own costs and complexities. But the EJ230 changes the calculation in ways that cannot be undone. The choice is now real, not theoretical, not aspirational, real. And once a genuine choice exists, the relationship between supplier and customer, between dominant power and allied nation, is permanently altered. Washington can no longer say, "You have no alternative." It must say, "Choose us anyway." That is a different conversation, and it is one the United States is not prepared to have. What do you think? Does the EJ230 powered Gripen fundamentally change Canada's fighter calculus? Will other F-35 customers begin exploring alternative paths? And what does post-dependence mean for the future of NATO and NORAD? Let me know in the comments. If you want to track these defense and geopolitical shifts before they become headlines, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We're watching the signals the rest of the world misses.